Shauna Bourne, and Cedric Baker, Oshita Moore, Delon Smith. Thank you guys for being here today. We deeply appreciate it. Yeah, give them a round of applause. I can hear that. Can you hear that? Yeah? Oh, that's good. All right, that's good. I really appreciate you being here because I know this isn't easy for you. I imagine it costs you something to have to share your experience, try to help white folks get it, and that's got to grow old. So this is a costly gift that I just want to acknowledge and thank you for. And I also want to say I'm sorry that we're in an environment in a country where you're more vulnerable than I am. And I'm committed to do all I can, and the church is committed to do all we can do to rectify that. So thank you for being here. Let me just start by saying it's been a horrendous week. How are you doing? Kind of wide open, but how are you guys doing?
Yeah, I can go first. First of all, thank you, Greg, for that powerful message. One of the things I just really appreciate about being under your leadership is that you're not afraid to go there. And so that's one of the things that keep me here at Woodland Hills. So I'll be honest, it's been a tough week.
Yeah.
It's just been really, really tough. I've been in this certain headspace around like, will things ever change? And I'm not holding much hope for that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think many of you might know, because I've spoken about it before, is that I'm a principal of elementary school, and in times like this, in times of crisis and tragedy, the principal is supposed to step up and they're supposed to give this message of hope to the community, and they're supposed to give this message of hope to their staff, and I honestly couldn't do that this week. And my only message to my staff was that I can't do that.
Yep.
I just really can't. So it's really disheartening to see what happened to Brother George Floyd, and to see this happen multiple times. And like I said, my hope for anything coming out of this, I just don't know.
I hear you.
That's where I'm at.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
What's she doing?
In the words of Big Floyd, everything hurts. My heart hurts, my soul hurts, my body hurts. I'm not sleeping well. My mind hurts, everything hurts. And I'm deeply, deeply angry. And as an Anabaptist, I don't think that we do a very good job of teaching us what to do with our anger in a holy kingdom way. So I'm trying to acknowledge and recognize that my anger is rooted in something good, because there is injustice. But how do I navigate that anger and bring it to a place of love? I'm actively working through that, and but I'm also really grateful to be here because of this stupid pandemic. Like I've said to myself, like every day, don't forget there's a global pandemic.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to be with my Black brothers and sisters and process this and grieve this. And last night in our prep time and just here, it's a gift to have that validation that God made us Black and He didn't make a mistake.
That's right.
In making us Black.
That's right. Thanks. Thank you.
Greg, thank you for the message. And to answer your question, I'm emotionally exhausted.
Yeah.
I feel like I've said to some, it's been a roller coaster of emotions. They've kind of hit on it. You're angry, you're mad, you're concerned, you're frustrated, you're scared, all at the same time. During this week, depending on which day you caught me on, and actually what hour it was, my emotions would be different. I also, like Delon, I was in a meeting with my executive team at work, and I broke down and just cried. And it hit me that in the middle of all of this, it almost felt like it's a matter of time, and the numbers are against me because of how I look. And just thinking about everyone that looks like me that's trying to navigate all of these systems, it's exhausting to continue to keep doing it. So it was just good to hear your message, to have hope again, because this week I have wrestled and it has been rough. And I have tried to wrestle within myself on what more can I do in the middle of all of this. So I feel like your message really gave me some hope.
Praise God, thanks. Thanks for sharing.
I'm tired. When we found out about Ahmaud Arbery, I kind of went into that place of lament that we've been talking about, and really just had to shut things down externally and because we're in a pandemic, just be with my family, because I just felt safe. And then when I started to come back out, we had Oshita and Dan and I were on a call for a Musecast prep meeting, and she mentioned George Floyd, and I hadn't, because I'd been shut down, I hadn't seen it. And so I immediately had to go and look, and I thought to myself, well, I couldn't watch it. I just couldn't watch it all. And then I thought to myself, well, this time, it'll be obvious that this is wrong. And you talked about that in your sermon. And then yet, as you go looking around on social media and you see different things, even that has been called into question. Like, I have heard people say, well, what did he do wrong? Why was he trying to get over on the store? Why was he arrested? Was he resisted? Like, and I'm like, no, this man is dead. And he was subdued. Like, he wasn't fighting. He couldn't fight. His hands are behind his back and he's on the ground. And then I see this picture of these two high school seniors, white guys, reenacting it and thinking it's funny. And here locally,
Yes.
they go to a Christian high school, and I just go,
Lord have mercy.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And then, because I'm biracial, like, my kids, are quite white passing, but my oldest son, he gets enraged and he gets angry and he wants to know why. And people look at him like, why do you care? As even if he were white, like, as if he shouldn't care.
Right.
But he's not all white. And so I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm tired. And I thank you for speaking out. I know the blowback you get.
Yeah.
But you're doing it anyway.
It just shows you how deep that indoctrination into the goodness of the structure, and even the most overwhelming evidence that it's not, it's just like there's self-talk that just dismisses that. Oh, thanks for sharing that, you guys. I appreciate that. I wonder if we could, if you could all share something in your experience where your experience of the system maybe is different than my experience of the system. In what ways do I get to not have happen to me what happens to you? I don't know. Is there anything you can share from your experience on that?
I can start on this one. I was thinking just how, as a black man, that I navigate that I feel like some people just take for granted. Little things that I do because I've been taught, even at a young age, you must be careful. You can't afford to make a mistake because it would be your life. And so things such as going in a grocery store, and I don't care if I'm buying a stick of gum or chapstick, I leave with a receipt and a bag every time now. And one of the reasons being is I don't want it to look like I'm stealing something from the store, which means that, again, you move forward, that my life could be on the line and I'm out of here, We've seen a lot of things happen. So it's just being able to navigate a system and wanting to try to make sure that people understand Black people are always trying to think for ourselves, but also think for our white counterparts at the same time, and making sure that we don't get caught in the crossfire.
Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely piggyback off what Cedric said. As a young Black boy, and many, if not all of our young Black kids were taught those things. One of the things I remember my dad telling me is, when you go in a store, take your hands out of your pocket.
Yeah.
But these different rules that we have to follow that white folks just don't have to even consider are some of those things. And even just more personally, we also talk about, my mom and dad have taught me that I have to work twice as hard as a white person to achieve. And I always tell people my twice as hard story. And a lot of these things, maybe because I'm in the midst of my profession, that many of the things that have happened during my profession come to mind. But I have 2 principal licenses because the first one just wasn't enough. So I've been a licensed principal since 2005. But I just had the opportunity to be a principal in a building about 4 or 5 years ago, after I took my second coursework. So I have 2 degrees sitting up that say the exact same thing from 2 different schools. And why is that? Why do I have to have that? Because the first one wasn't enough. And so, just things like that. Things that I think one of the biggest things that I feel is just how I'm perceived when I walk into a place. And I go back to like when I first became a principal, and I was greeting, this is open house, and I was greeting my families, and I couldn't tell you how many of my families, white and Black, because this system of white supremacy, it permeates us too. I would say, hey, how you doing? I'm Delon Smith, I'm the principal. And the response was, you're the principal? And
Wow.
Because of this system of white supremacy, I don't know if you're saying that because I might look young, or if you're saying that because I'm Black. I don't know. I don't know, but there are countless situations of that and things like that happening where people are surprised that I speak so well, or they're surprised that I'm doing this, or they're surprised about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, right, absolutely. And until we get to a point where those things aren't surprising, we're going to continue to be in the mess that we're in.
Delon, I'll tell you, you're gracious, but you're not that young, so.
Not anymore, no.
Yeah, so, but the assumption that the system was predicated on, those assumptions about the obviousness that Black folks are not going to sell in math, and they're not going to, that's still prevalent. And it, I think, helps support the structure. If they convince themselves that you're that less than, then anything you say, they're insulated against you from critiquing the system.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of keeping you down.
Yeah.
Rashida?
Yeah, so I have an example from watching this happen in my son's life, and he was in elementary school. So we lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, very progressive, very woo-woo kind of school. They went and hugged the trees after they made maple syrup from getting maple from the trees, that kind of school. And at the end of the year, they had this big field trip, and it was something like Boundary Waters, which is like a water park amusement situation. You would never catch me there. But all the kids were working towards this, and I think it was like a perk of sixth graders. It was like their last thing they could do. And my son was super excited to go. And he wanted the silly bands, those like bracelets, those little plastic bracelets, were like a big thing. He had a bunch of them he brought to school the morning of the trip to hand out to his group of friends. And he and a couple little boys and a couple other little girls, he handed them out. This was like right before a field trip, and I'm in between two educators, so y'all know that energy right before everybody's trying to go on a field trip. They're just all bouncing off the walls, and they were flinging those silly bands at each other, and girls were making some hits, the boys were making some hits. Apparently, one of the boys in my son's group flung one at a little girl, and it hit her like in the face. She started crying. So she goes and tells the teacher, and she says that Tyson is the one that did it to her. And so the teacher pulls Tyson aside. My son's biracial. He has very curly, kinky hair, but all of his other features are white passing. He's the only black kid in the group. Pulls Tyson aside. He's the one who's chastised. He's the one who's told he was wrong for bringing gifts to his friends, all of that. None of the other students were addressed. So then the kids are kind of gathering their things, and my son goes to this girl who's his friend to check in on her, but he says to her at some point, "Why did you go tell on me? Why did you say it was me?" To which this little girl starts crying and says that he is bullying her. So then she goes back to that same teacher and says, "Tyson's bullying me now." So then the teacher pulls Tyson aside and calls the principal. And they say to him, "You cannot come on this trip because you are too aggressive." And that aggressive to a black man, to a black young boy, that is something that our men hear all the time, that they are someone to be afraid of. So my son stood and watched all his friends load up in the school bus on a trip that he was excited to go to, that he had earned, and they all went because the system did not care enough to protect my son and listen to my son, but they sure did. That system did listen to that little white girl. And I know this girl's family. Like, I know that they've never even taught her to hate or to blame a black person. I knew that family. But there's something about the system that supports white supremacy even in our children.
Just a reminder of Emmett Till. A white woman accuses a black boy of anything wrong. You looked at me wrong. Could be at the end of your life. Okay. Anyone else want to share anything? Okay. I think that's Cedric. One of the things I think is so important here is to get a sense of context and to zoom out. I don't think you can understand this unless you understand all the stuff that went before. And I think a lot of folks just have a lack of awareness of kind of all that's gone on before. What are maybe some things that have happened that have got us here? They've come to mind.
Yeah.
And any of you can share what comes to mind.
I was just thinking, when we say systems or the system, I think people think so broadly in context, and we're familiar with systems. We understand the interstate highway system. We understand internally our bodies have a system. Ultimately, the true definition of a system is that things are working together intentionally for a purpose and an intended outcome.
Right.
And so it's a common goal. And when we say system up here or systems, we're saying that same thing is happening within our community for a common goal, and it is intentional. And so you kind of talked about, and Greg, I appreciate you bringing it up, you talked about it during your message about slavery, Jim Crow. We also have things such as redlining. You brought it up in education. There are systemic ways where policies, practices, and procedures have been used to support our white fellows and discriminate against our black and brown men and women. And so one, specific example that I can think of is redlining, where there were banks that were not, you can look at a map, there were banks that would not give loans to certain people, specifically black people, in certain neighborhoods.
Right.
And so we think that in some of our cities that all of the black people just decided all of a sudden to go live in this neighborhood. No, there has been a systemic way of pushing and moving people into things through policies, practices, and procedures over time. So we just didn't automatically get here.
Right.
That there has been a dedicated approach to systems that you brought up that got us here, and I feel like that's important to highlight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the Rondo neighborhood, classic case where you could put that highway anywhere you want, but you're going to put it right through the
Right
black
through the-
community.
exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It happened in, what, the 60s, was it? You split apart the entire community.
Yep.
Yeah, if I could piggyback off of Cedric as well. Just, what comes to mind, I think you put it out eloquently, Cedric, as far as the system. And we talk in education, too, about the system. We talk all the time about, test scores. That's a big thing for us. And it's not a secret that our black and brown kids don't do as well as our white kids on tests. As a matter of fact, Minnesota leads the nation in the education of white students and is dead last in education of black students.
Seriously.
And
didn't know that.
it's just wild. But this permeates every piece of life.
Yeah.
So this white supremacy system, this system of racism, it permeates everything. And we do get the outcomes that it's intended to get.
Yeah.
And until we break these down, and there are some schools that have been able to break them down individually, but we have to understand this is all encompassing. Until those things are broken down, we're going to continue to see the results that we see. We're going to continue to see black and brown kids performing under white kids. We're going to continue to see those things. The last thing I'll say was, if you haven't watched, Trevor Noah recently put out a post. It's about 18 minutes long, and it's fabulous. But he talks in there about, he started talking about the destruction of communities and things like that as a result of what's happened here. And he talked about how he wanted white folks to just think about what a society is. And a society is basically a contract that a group of individuals agree to abide by.
Yeah.
And white folks have not abided by that contract when it comes to people of color. Everything that we expect to happen as people of color, a part of this society, they're not necessarily guaranteed to us.
Right.
Freedoms, humanity, those things aren't necessarily guaranteed to us. And so, in turn, some of the destruction that's been going on is he views it as, well, you've torn up the contract, so why do we need to abide by the contract as well? And so we're getting into some really, we've already been into some really dangerous waters, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that this whole contract of humanity has not been abided by many, many white folks. And as a black man, me and people like me have had to suffer the consequences of it.
Yeah, and I think, it's okay. Part of the one of the trickle-down effects as it hits the individual level is we don't get the same benefit of the doubt that people in the white community get. And one very clear example of that was several years ago when my children were younger, and it was during the summer, and we had just gotten back from a trip, and so our family vehicle was dirty, and I think part of our tabs were covered. And so Scott was here, my husband who's white was here at work, and I got pulled over. And the officer, who was a woman, was pretty aggressive, demanded to know who the children were in my vehicle. And when I said that they were mine, she didn't believe me. She thought, well, at least you're the nanny, you're the paid help. And I was like, these are my babies. And she had asked me to step out of the car, and I just said to her, would you please allow me to call my husband? He is just up the road. And she did. She allowed me to call him. And when Scott came, her tune totally changed, completely changed. When Scott came in his white privilege to see what was going on with his family, she was like, you are a wonderful woman, what a beautiful family, go about your way, make sure you get your car clean so we can see your tabs. It was totally different. Like, I wasn't given the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
And she didn't believe that my children were my children. That doesn't happen typically to white people.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's like our story over and over again.
TC and I, my husband's white too, TC and I have this kind of contract between us that he will go first. Like if we're gonna go shopping or we're gonna go do something, when we were looking at places, that's him taking his white privilege and saying, I'm gonna go and open the door so that my black wife and my children can come in.
Right.
Because that is the exact same experience that we have.
Yeah.
They don't believe me, but they believe him.
Right.
Because he's white.
Yeah.
Anyone who is not confirming or not agreeing with the system is suspect, right? Because the system we know is good and true, and if you're not seeing it that way, I'm not sure about you. I mean, that's how I think it operates. You know, something occurred to me, Cedric, when you're talking about systems. You know, the thing about a system is that if it's working, you don't notice it. Like, I never think about the highway system because it's working. You only notice it when something's wrong. You go, what's wrong with this system? I can't get to where I want to go. So we got this reality here where it's working for the white folks. And so it's fine and wonderful, but it's not working for other folks. And if you won't listen, if I'm in charge of the system, I got to hear everybody, right? Because it's supposed to work for everybody. But if you have the dominant culture is not willing to listen and believe, well, then it just keeps on going on and on and on. And it's like Einstein saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, thinking you're going to get a different result. It just goes on and on and on. And that's the despairing fatigue that so many feel. So last night, someone had, again, got a little Twitter spat. And there's a lot of Twitter spatting going on. But what a person was saying, they were mad that I wasn't condemning enough of the violence, and that's the real issue here. And I was trying to say, well, you know, you've got to understand what's behind it. You can't just look at I don't condone this, but you've got to understand it. And the response was, the person was saying, no, these are individuals making a choice. You choose to break a window, and so it's all on you. And it seems to me there's a fundamentally different way that, generally speaking, that white folks have of looking at the world in kind of a very individualistic way that is not shared by the African American community or by brown folks. Oshita, would you like to speak about that? Like, how do you think the perceptions are different on the part of white folks? Generally speaking, of course, you know, I don't want to brand everyone the same, but.
Well, those of you that know me, I use this phrase, throwing spaghetti against the wall, which means I'm actively processing a thought. But I think one of the theologies that we have here, one of the things that I love about Woodland is that we have a theology of a backstory, of trying to understand what happened in someone's life to get them to that place of believing something or saying something or doing something. And I think for the white community, individualism has served them super well. And the system has affirmed their individualistic view. If we go all the way back to slavery, and we see plantation owners and slave owners, they were celebrated for their ingenuity, they were celebrated for their acumen, they were celebrated for their leadership in the community based on their wealth that they built off the backs of black people that they deeply dehumanized. And then we have institutions named after them, and we have statues built up for them, and we have family names that are passed down, and there's a pride behind that family name. And there's this undercurring narrative that these individuals, these white individuals, or these white individual families, they have achieved and attained something because of their hard work, because of what they've done, and we need to look and celebrate them. Not ever looking at African Americans, not looking at black people, and not recognizing the good in those communities, and not giving them the benefit of the doubt. And so I think that white people naturally go to that place because that's the narrative that you've been given, that you can achieve and do whatever you want and be as prosperous as you want. And so it's up to you and your choices. And then you translate that philosophy onto black and brown people for whom we never had that opportunity to be celebrated, to be individually acknowledged. We were just a group of dumb chattel to just do the hard work. And so I think that when the system is completely affirming that when these kind of things happen, it's very easy for a white person to want to go individual and look and look and look. And I think as kingdom people, we need to enter into that space then where we're encouraged to grieve and mourn and hear the collective cries and say something's going on here. So how do we look at this group of people who are suffering and not try to go individual, oh, they did something wrong. That's why I don't know, I can't speak for all of you, but that's why when the narratives start coming up, forgery, he was smoking, he ran, blah, blah, blah. That is what makes it so upset, because you want to go individual about all the bad things about us, but you don't want to go individual about all the good things about us that we bring to the table.
And about the deficiency of the system that does that to you. That's really good.
Yeah, and that's just a whole nother layer of the pain, right, that we have to live through again, is when, again, not condoning all of the outrage and the riots and the looting and all of that, the damage that's being done, but when people look at that and start harping on that and forget about the why behind it, forget about the fact that there is blood crying out from the ground, it hurts all over again. I have seen more anger toward the damage being done to the cities than I saw anger toward the murder of George Floyd. And that's hard.
Yep.
And so in all sincerity, I want to ask, well, then what would be acceptable? What would be acceptable? Like, what would make you hear the cry of the Black community? Because it feels like peaceful protests haven't been enough. It feels like speaking out hasn't been enough. It feels like videoing instances hasn't been enough. Taking a knee hasn't, like, all of those things have somehow been offensive. You know, if we're doing a peaceful protest, you're blocking traffic and I can't get to where I need to go. It's like there is nothing that seems to have caught people's attention to where they go, I see it, I hear it, I believe you, and now let's make a change together. And so I don't have an answer, I have the question. How would you like for this to look so that you will understand and hear and believe and then respond?
Yeah, Martin Luther King said that rioting is the language of the unheard.
Yeah.
And if your loved one is killed like that, like George Floyd, and you won't hear me and you won't believe me, I got to grab a megaphone. And how do I get the attention of the people who can change this? And and so there's some who try to disrupt the system. It's like, how do I'll block an intersection. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? What about now? Please. Yeah. Your knee is choking us. And people get desperate. That doesn't condone violence, but man, it makes it understandable. It's legitimate. And if you don't want them doing this, well then offer an alternative, like listening.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to wrap it up, but let me ask this, if I could. We've got a lot of folks listening here, and it's a chance to speak to folks like me. If there's one thing that you would want to say in response to this event, to help folks like me understand, to help me get on the inside, to feel it on the inside, to bring in lament, what would you have to say? And you don't have to say anything, but if you have something you want to share, I'd really like to hear it.
I have two things. So the first thing is, the morning my mom passed, she went to the ambulance. She went to the hospital in the ambulance first. My other siblings had to follow, and my brother was speeding to try to catch up with the ambulance to try to get to the hospital because my mom was still alive when they put her in the ambulance. And a police officer pulled him over, and my brother is scared for his mom, and he's a big personality type, and so he's exuberantly telling the officer, I gotta get in the, like, can you just follow me to the hospital? We can do this there. I gotta get to the, like, he's just really, and the officer throws him on the ground and handcuffs him and takes my brother to jail. Mm-hmm. My brother sat in a jail cell while his mother was dying. Mm. And when my sister called and told me, because I didn't know anything except that he got pulled over. I didn't know about the jail part, him being taken. But when my sister called me and said, Kenneth just got pulled over because she could see in her car, my first thought was, God, I can't lose my mom and my brother in one night. Mm. And that is kind of the undercurrent of pain that I feel when I send my brown sons out into the world, when I go into the world, when my brother and my father goes in the world. And that's not right, and that's not fair. And the other thing I want to say is that white people, you're at the place right now where you're really asking the question, what can I do? Yeah. And I just really want to lovingly say, if you can Google your vacation or a Great Lake house, then you can really Google
Yep.
race and justice. And you can really do that work. And I would much rather be a partner and a journey person with you on this, through this conversation, as you process some of the things that you are learning, but I don't want to be your educator. That's an unfair place to put me because the stuff is out there.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say right now is we're not here to teach you. We are here to love you as brothers and sisters in Christ. So let us do that, and you
Yeah.
do your work.
Yeah.
I would agree, and I want to piggyback off of what Oshita said, and also just add that in addition to that, we need white allies. Greg, you pushed it really hard in your message, and I'm grateful that you did. If the system was going to change, if it was based on us, it would have been done already.
Right. Done, been done.
Yep.
So we need white allies, and specifically, we need Christian white allies. The influence that you have, and I'm with Oshita, I can't tell you specifically what you need to do. My request or my suggestion is for you to go through your prayer time and ask God to help you with what influence you have in your sphere, and use that to make changes to some of these systems. If you have the ear of someone, say something. It may cost you maybe some of your credibility, but what you are doing is Christian and it is right.
Yeah.
And so I would say, please use your influence. Please use your ability to make some changes, and pray to God that he shows you where that influence is, because in addition to prayer, to be honest with you all, I'm past prayer. We need action,
Yeah.
and we need prayer to lead to something.
Yeah.
So pray and ask God to help you do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to say, because I hear this all the time, like, I need people to quit saying that racism is no longer an issue, that that's something in the past and we need to get over it. Yep, we had a black president. That didn't solve racism. Like, that doesn't mean we're all good. And for people are even like denying the fact that what happened between George Floyd and the ex-officer was race related. Like, it's like there is too much of no, but. Like, just believe and check your thought process. Take that before the Lord. If when you see something like that, your first thought isn't, oh, dear God, that's a brother who is now no longer with us. If your first thought is, what did he do? Or if all those other narratives, or that's not the America I know, or, but I have black friends, so that would never be me. Like, no, like, I appreciate all of that, but at the same time, it's time to really get honest with ourselves and our thought processes and their own biases that we have, and take that to the Lord and allow him to show you maybe where you're blind to being a contributor to some of this.
Yeah. I think I would echo everything that was said here. The first things I was thinking was educate yourself. It's not black people or people of color's job to educate you. And so, like Oshita said, you can Google your lake house, you can Google anything. So,
I'd like to Google Lake House.
yeah, right. Educate yourself on what's going on. I mean, some of the just ignorance and lack of experience is just it's crazy. Just this morning, and I'll try to be brief with this. Just this morning, the National Security Advisor, and I don't know if it's the permanent one or the temporary one, as far as that goes, but he was asked a question. This is on CNN with Jake Tapper. He was asked a question. Is there some to the point of, is there a systematic racism in policing? And his answer was no. His answer was no. It's just these bad apples, and that kind of you brought some of those things out in your sermon. But we have to, white folks, if you're listening to me, we have to get past that individualistic thinking, and this is just a one-off and one incident, or bad apples. Those things I can't tell you, or we got to get the whole story. I can't tell you how much those things infuriate me as a black man to hear things like that, because you're taking your experience and your perspective as though it's law, and without even considering the perspective of black folks. There was. and I'll try to wrap this up. I'm pretty passionate about this, but there was this this picture on Facebook, and it was these 3 white people and a black dude, and it was like, what kind of America is it when I can't be safe in my house? And these are all referring to things that have happened to black folks as far as where they've been killed. Yeah. What kind of America is it when I don't feel safe to go to the store? Or what kind of America is it when my basic human dignities are denied? And then the black dude says, my America. Yeah. Because that's exactly what we as black folks go through. So I need white folks that's part of whiteness, is you have to be able to understand that your perspective is not necessarily the perspective of everyone else. And you have to be open to hearing other perspectives so that you can take your perspective and, like you were saying, Greg, make some course corrections and shift that thing so that you can understand really what's happening here.
That's good, man. That's good. One of the biggest challenges I've had is trying to get some white folks, and the ones who stick around Woodland Hills get on board on the whole, but to get them to see that you have a white perspective. Mm-hmm. That's a distinct perspective, and it has a distinct meaning. The response I've sometimes gotten has been like, there you go, playing identity politics again. I don't have a white perspective. I just call it as it is. And
as you see it.
Well, that's the white perspective.
Exactly.
Because it was set up for you, by you, and it runs well, for you, and that's your perspective. And so you normalize that for everybody, and now you don't listen to the, please, I can't breathe.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Greg, you have been an ally, if I can use that word. And you have been outspoken on behalf of the black community. You have sought out ways in which to educate yourself, like we've been saying. And so I think we would all say thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
We
Greg.
benefit from that. And that's not just a platitude. No, thank you, for real. But can you tell us, how did you get to where you are? You're white, in case people were unclear. You're a white male with privilege. How did you get to where you are, to where you've recognized that, and then and have become an ally for those unlike you?
Oh. Well, thanks for saying that. It was very sweet. I get at the core of it for me is this. I go with theology, but when I really learned how to get all my worth in life from Christ, it's so freeing. Everyone needs to get their life and worth and significance from Christ, the core needs, because that means I don't need to protect anything. I don't need to defend. I don't need to have my perspective on anything to be correct. I'm okay in myself, and that can create a humility to learn. So if I hear that there's white superiority, I remember in the 90s when I first started dealing with this, okay, white supremacy, I know I'm not a white supremacist, and the idea that would ever influence me is just so offensive, and all that. You just go into it, but when I really was freed, getting that core word from Christ, I could stop this and now look at it. Well, maybe I am. You're allowed to get honest with yourself. And then that can be, for me, it was just a matter of get curious. And so I went to a lot of seminars and a lot of reading, and they weren't all positive experiences. I would go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Some of it was negative, but to keep, to explore. I think one of the core things is my life, I realized, was quite quarantined. I grew up with a father who was really ahead of his time, I think, for a white guy on civil rights. He was really, I've talked about that in the past. So I didn't have any kind of racial ideology, but I never saw my dad hanging out with any black folks. And I didn't have any black folks intersecting with my life in not significant ways. In grad school, a little bit, have friendships, but they didn't go deep enough to challenge the plausibility structure of the white supremacy system. It was really only when I began to develop deeper relationships. It was a combination of learning and reading and all this, going to the seminars, but then developing relationships of credibility, where now you can begin to really get on the inside of that perspective. A big thing was when the O.J. Simpson trial happened, and I and Norm were just kind of becoming friends at this point. Norm Blagman used to be his African-American worship leader here at Woodland Hills Church, and To me, it was just so obvious that OJ was guilty. I was like, come on, how could, I think of like 80 or over 90% of whites saw him as obviously guilty, and like 80% of African Americans thought at least there's a reasonable doubt. It's like, what reasonable doubt, But Norm thought, absolutely, that cop could have planted that, and he has a list of experiences that show that. That was a side of the justice system that I was not familiar with, and I wouldn't be because it doesn't affect me. Right. The system works for me, but it wasn't working for him, and so we've got to learn. You've got to be humility that leads to ending the lockdown, that leads to not being quarantined, which can then hopefully develop a heart, and this is a heart. There's a lot of studies that show that white folks have, in general, have a hard time empathizing, really empathizing with people of color. But that's what's got to happen when I can begin to see George Floyd as my brother, my father, my son. When I can enter into that, that's when it's like now, I don't need a book to tell me to care. You care. The love is there. And now what can I do? And immediately you cut through all those, well, you shouldn't have been passing a 40. You cut through that because it's irrelevant when you love somebody. To get there, that's the ultimate game, but it starts with just getting life from Christ, humbling yourself, de-quarantining yourself, get out there, and then develop the heart. Start walking with people through this. Because it's not going to change until a sufficient number of white Christians want it to change. Yeah. And then it will change, which means the fact that it's not changed yet is on us. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
On that, I think we should end. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you sharing that. That was good stuff. And I know it cost you something. In fact, it means a lot to me that you're coming to a white. We're still 75% white, and that presents its own challenges. It takes a lot of trust to ask, will I be able to be me in this system, in this body? And I just appreciate you being here so much. Folks, pray with me here as we close.
Zoom prayer too.
Oh yeah, I want to mention, thank you, Shauna, for that after this, if you want to pray about any issue at all, you may want to process some stuff, you'll see that there's a prayer Zoom line on your app or whatever, and so you just can push that, and we'd love to minister to you, whatever the need may be. Abba, Father, our hearts are heavy. It's been a tough week, it's been a tough morning, but we look to you. Our eyes are on you. You are our hope. You are at work. You're turning evil. You're a master at bringing good out of evil, redemption out of evil, and we're trusting you to do that with this. Holy Spirit, be working in lives and hearts, especially on the parts of white pastors and white Christians, to end this, to have the heart to opt out of, to see the system as something that is not good for all. The truth of Jesus Christ is stronger and greater than any truth we might believe about any system, any ideology. We look to you, Lord Jesus. Yes. Pour out your peace on this in the state and on this nation, and now it's going throughout the world, but not peace that sweeps anything under the rug, Lord. The blood of Abel cries out, and it must be addressed. It's never been addressed in this country, which is why it just goes on and on and on. Lord, raise up allies to bring an end to this. My black and brown brothers and sisters would live in the same country that I live in, on the same level. Lord, we pray for the day where it will be self-evident that all people are created equal. Let it be, Lord. In Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen. Amen, amen. God bless you guys. God bless you guys. Be praying this week. I'll end with this. I would encourage you. We've had folks from Woodland Hills going out and cleaning up, helping with the cleanup. What can they do? Here's one thing to start. Get a broom and go out and see how you can serve. God bless you guys. See you next week.